Jim Henson had. It's not easy to say. It's just not. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. I am here on day 180 in the classroom. I had this jacket on. I had my hair up. My dad said I looked like a boy when I recorded myself. I don't think a jean jacket makes me look like a boy. Let's keep a move on. We are here on day 180. I'm Dr. Annette Feravich. I think I already said all that. We are here in the classroom, and we are reading our book. I'm doing a little daydreaming on the spot, wondering about a whole lot of activity that's been going on here. In particular, which is very interesting, isn't it, reading this World War II book and a child waiting for me while I was on my walk in Milford, Michigan, waiting to give me a Nazi salute. And when I turned and saw, his mother was filming it. Okay, so we were in the middle of the chapter in our book, The War to End All Wars. No, I don't think actually I did. But I think I will soon. I have been putting together playlists, but I've been doing it mostly for the early birds, trying to stay a little organized with one class before I go on to the next. But I really think that I'm going to, if I haven't, I will put this in one playlist. So this book will be together in a playlist, and I'll probably include it in a reading room as well, and with some other books, maybe in early bird stories as well. Probably not in early bird stories, I won't do that. Anyway, all I'm saying is I'm getting organized. Have you seen what they pay teachers? And then what do? Then they scrutinize their every move, don't they? That's what they do. Then they scrutinize our every move, trying to make us look bad, going, where's all the money? It must have went to the education department. It's in diversity education. Where's all the money? As lead bombs are falling from the sky. Ugh. Stretcher bearers at the Battle of Somme, September 1916. German casualties that day, around 6,000, were a tenth of British losses. Now it's starting to hurt, right? Because all the way up until this point, as we've been reading, casualties have been really quite equal. So British casualties here at this battle are 10 times that of the Germans. At many places along the front, German troops were so appalled by the slaughter that when they realized their own lives were no longer at risk, they stopped firing so that British wounded could struggle back to their own lines. One German soldier called the day's battle an amazing spectacle of unexampled gallantry, courage, and bulldog determination on both sides. It's people acting like people, right? As opposed to acting like soldiers. And what too many people with money in their hands want to do is they want people to be like soldiers, right? They don't want people to be like people, because they would cry and they would help one another and they would bond together. So that's why we have all of this isolation with our phones and with our technology and with our COVID. This is the Battle of Somme. That's how I'm going to pronounce it, okay? Because nobody corrected me. The Battle of the Somme continued for the next 4 months as the opposing armies fought bloody engagements over tiny patches of ground. So it's kind of the same story. They're giving you two different perspectives here, because the last chapter was the Battle of Verdun. And then I'm pretty sure I'm saying right. She's got that German accent down. I know she does. General Haig's expectation of the breakthrough was never realized. Like Verdun, the Somme quickly became a war of attrition in which each side tried to wear down the other. But also what that is saying, if it's a war of attrition, both sides are saying, adios, amigo, not a war for me. Look at what you're doing to these people. We're helping them now. Take that, you SOBs. Or something like that. In case you didn't know, there's interjections into the actual real story, which is why it's not an audiobook. One summer evening, soon after the Battle of the Somme had started, Captain Herbert Schultzbach, a German artillery officer, what else would he be, recalled, the guns were rumbling and there was a terrible noise of the battle in our ears. Yet where we lay, just 30 meters from the trenches, there were mountains and peace and hardly any shooting. We could see the French soldiers, and one night a Frenchman started to sing. He was a wonderful tenor. None of us dared to shoot, and suddenly we were all looking out from the trenches and applauding. And the Frenchman said, merci. It was, that's got a little bit of a Spanish accent to it since I trilled my R. It was peace in the middle of war. And the strange thing was that just a few kilometers northwards, the terrible battle of the Somme was going on. In September, the British introduced their new weapons, the tank, without much success. A fleet of 36 Mark I tanks lumbered into action, terrifying the Germans and leading a British advance of 3,500 yards before the tanks were knocked out by artillery fire or stopped by the mechanical breakdowns in rough ground. Thank God for that, right? For sure, thank God for that. Allied forces continued their attacks with little gains until snowstorms and rain turned the Somme battlefield into a muddy morass. On November 19th, the Allied offensive was officially called off. By then, the greatest Allied advance along the entire 25-mile front had been 7 miles, and the French and British had failed to break through the German lines. The Allies had lost more than 600,000 men killed and wounded. German casualties were about 450,000, which is still significant. I mean, that is significant. That's significant, especially when you could stop in the midst of all of it and prefer to applaud the opposing team's tenor, right? You're just like, give me any reason to give this battle the big effing middle finger. Give me one good reason, right? Yeah. Most of the British troops were inexperienced volunteers, men who had enlisted while Britain was raising a new army to fight in France and who marched to the front singing rousing battle songs. They have been called an army of innocents. The Somme was the first experience of war. They offered up their lives in an epic battle that has haunted British memory ever since. As well it should. But that being said, they said it did. There is responsibility and admittance in this war that Britain seemed to be prepared to fight at sea. Not these land battles where so many innocents and young men, because they would be fighting the land battles, not the sea battles where you had probably experienced men with the cannons and the whatever, right? But you know, I don't know. It seems to me the British had, hauntings of this. And the French stand up and sing. They're like, this is not. What are they? While the British and French were fighting the Germans at Verdun and the Somme, Russian and Italian troops battled the armies of Austria-Hungary on distant fronts. The Italians had been locked in feudal combat along the Isonzo River in Austria since the summer of 1915, fighting a succession of inclusive battles. In November 1916, the ninth battle of the Isonzo, like the previous 8, lasted only a few days and resulted in a heavy toll of killed and wounded for almost no gain of ground. In the Balkans, Romania, a latecomer, entered the war on the side of the Allies and was quickly overrun by the Germans, who gained control of the country's valuable oil and grain resources. So the Balkan islands, so it's Romania. So again, you're talking about across the board, worldwide, who would be the underdogs, who would be seen as immigrants, right? Like they are looked at as less than in this country, for example. It'd be the Slavs, right? From the name slaves come from that name, right? The Russians, almost written off by both sides, surprised everyone. They launched an attack in Galicia under General Alexei Bursalov that overwhelmed Austro-Hungarian forces, captured huge numbers of prisoners, and recovered some of the territory lost during the Russian retreat the previous year. Bursalov's victory was the one successful contribution to the joint Allied offensive in 1916. It almost knocked Austria-Hungary out of the war, but it was won at the cost of 1 million Russian casualties, a staggering loss from which the Tsar's armies would never recover. Yeah, because many of them probably also said, no, we are a cavalry. We also a gentleman's war, by the way. Turkey's Armenian population, a vulnerable minority in the Ottoman Empire, suffered grievously during the war. For a century, the ancient kingdom of Armenia had been divided between Turkey and Russia. With those nations at war, Armenians living under Turkish rule accused of aiding the Russians were increasingly subject to persecution by the Turks. Beginning in 1915, hundreds of thousands of Armenians forcibly removed from the border area where they lived, either starved or were killed in what historians have called the first true genocide of the 20th century. And you know, it's interesting because I wonder if Pinker has that on there. I think he does. I don't think he would have missed that, but I'm not absolutely sure about that. We could take a look at that. I can look that up and get some coffee. At Verdun, meanwhile, after a summer standoff, the fighting flared up again. In October, the French moved to recover lost ground and recaptured Fort Douma. I mean, really, seriously, how many vowels are there? 1, 2, 3, 4 vowels in a row, and they're using U twice. Fort, name unpronounceable. In December, they mounted another offensive and regained much of the ground lost earlier in the year. By the end of 1916, French and German troops were facing each other across a front that had scarcely changed since the fighting began in February. On the Western Front alone, more than 500,000 men lost their lives in 1916. Second Lieutenant Alfred Jabare, serving with the French 124th Regiment at Verdun, made the following entry in his diary on May 23, 1916. Humanity is mad. It must be mad to do what it is doing. What a massacre. What scenes of horror and carnage. I cannot find words to translate my impressions. Hell cannot be so terrible. Men are mad. Men, specifically, very specifically, men in power, white men in power specifically, Who's saying this? Why I was laughing was at my pronunciation of these, except for the fact that I got Verdun perfectly right. I'm gonna laugh about that for a while. I'm sorry. So who said that? Second lieutenant, not even first lieutenant, Alfred Joubert. That was the last entry in Alfred Joubert's diary. That day, or possibly the next, his life was ended by a German shell. He was 21. Yeah, they're probably like, yeah, shut up with all your words of wisdom. You think you've seen madness? You have not. We heard you. We were listening in. You know, and I also say, you know, the madmen, you made those men mad as well, right? I mean, through all this warfare, that's exactly what you were trying to do, is make those young men mad and be heard. Hey, listen, that MFer was heard. Guess what happened to him? So they also endured the casualties as well, right? The second, isn't that what I said? Second lieutenant, not first lieutenant? I mean, the shame of it, and the fact that what? No white supremacist is blushing? No white supremacist is embarrassed? Carry on! A German U-boat surfaces in the North Atlantic. With the land war deadlocked, Britain and Germany were each determined to achieve ultimate victory by winning the war at sea. All the warring nations needed access to the outside world. Neither Britain nor Germany produced enough food to support its populations. Both countries had to import raw materials to supply their war industries, and this was all done by ship. The British believed that by blockading German shipping lanes and seaports, they could starve Germany into submission. And that's what I fear. Great Britain's Royal Navy had long dominated the world's oceans. Early in the war, British warships swept German shipping from the seas and clamped a total blockade, cutting off most of Germany's imports. Germany retaliated by sending its fleet of submarines into action, called U-boats, Unterseebooten, or undersea boats. Oh, Jesus, my German is perfect. So is my Spanish. Oh my gosh. Come on, who can't say unter? And then the word see right there and booten. Come on, anyone can say that. Not with that accent, Annette. Submarines were the only German vessels that could venture safely into open waters. Within weeks of the war's outbreak, German U-boats had sunk 3 British cruisers in the English Channel, sending 1,500 sailors to their deaths. But really, oh my gosh, okay, I get it. German U-boats are sinking British cruisers? How does that happen? The British declared the entire North Sea a war zone in which even neutral ships would be stopped and searched. All goods destined for German ports would be seized and confiscated. The Germans in turn declared all approaches to the British Isles war zones. They would seek to destroy not only enemy warships, but also hostile merchant ships, those carrying war supplies to Britain, and they would torpedo those ships without first providing for the safety of passengers and crew, and violation of international agreements concerning naval warfare. Okay, I don't think I read the title here. I did not. Chapter 11, we are on Chapter 11, The War at Sea. And this is a German U-boat surfaces in the North Atlantic. Oh. Okay, so I guess I can see how they could be sinking the cruisers. And isn't that interesting, U-boat? Isn't that just kind of interesting, the terminology? So it's like they're coming up underneath the cruiser, right? Like, shh. Like, U-butt. Struck by a torpedo fired from the submarine in the foreground, a merchant steamer explodes and starts to sink. More than 7,000 Allied and neutral ships were sunk, damaged, or captured by German U-boats during the war. So here's a picture. What an amazing picture. Now, who's taking this picture? Unterglupen. Right? The Germans are taking that picture. So you can see the pride that they're taking in their military prowess. A welcoming crowd greets the British passenger liner Lusitania as it arrives in New York for the first time, September 13th, 1907. I heard that one had a lot of battles, right? If this is a cruiser, though, it's still amazing. Oh, because they're coming up out of nowhere and torpedoing them. Duh. That's how they're doing it. See, our minds don't even work that way. My mind doesn't even work that way. I said ours as in women's minds don't even work that way. They don't. The British declared the entire North Sea a war zone in which even neutral ships would be stopped and searched. All goods destined for German ports would be seized and confiscated. The Germans in turn declared all approaches to the British Isles war zones. They would seek to destroy not only enemy warships, but also hostile merchant ships, those carrying war supplies to Britain, and they would torpedo those ships without first providing for the safety of passengers and crew in violation of international agreements concerning naval warfare. I think I already read that. Germany warned citizens of neutral countries not to board ships going into war zones, but Woodrow Wilson, the American president, insisted on full neutral trading rights with all the warring nations, and he refused to limit Americans' freedom to travel. Thanks, Woodrow. On May 1st, 1915, the British luxury liner Lusitania, famed as the biggest and fastest ship in the Atlantic service, sailed from New York on a voyage to England. That morning, New York newspapers carried an advertisement placed by the German embassy in Washington, warning travelers intending to embark on the Atlantic voyage, do so at your own risk. Germany had reason to believe that the Lusitania was carrying American-manufactured munitions as part of its cargo. Oh, you think? Coming in with the largest ship ever seen. 6 days later, on May 7th, as the giant British steamship neared the end of the festive voyage, it turned into the path of a patrolling German submarine off the southern coast of Ireland and was torpedoed. The Lusitania sank in 15 minutes. There was a dull thud-like, not very loud, but unmistakable explosion. Lady Margaret Mackworth recalled, it seemed to come from a little below us and about the middle of the vessel on the port side. As I ran up the stairs, the boat was already heeling over. As I ran, I thought, I wonder I wonder I'm not more frightened. And then I'm beginning to get frightened, but I must let myself. I saw that the water had come over on the deck. We were not, as I had thought, 60 feet above the sea. We were already under the sea. I saw the water green, just about up to my knees. I do not remember its coming up further. That must all have happened in a second. The ship sank and I was sucked right down with her. The next thing I can remember was being deep down under the water. It was very dark, nearly black. I fought to come up. I was terrified of being caught on some part of the ship and kept down. When I came to the surface, I found that I formed part of a large, round, floating island composed of people and debris of all sorts, lying so close together that at first there was not very much water noticeable in between. People, boats, hen coops, chairs, rafts, boards, and goodness knows what besides all floating check by jowl. Many people were praying aloud in a curious, unemotional monotone. Others were shouting for help in much the same slow, impersonal chant. Boat, boat, boat. Lady Mackworth and her father were rescued. Of the 2,000 passengers on board, some 1,200 drowned, including many women and children. Among the victims were 128 Americans. The sinking of the Lusitania shocked the American people, helped turn public opinion against Germany, and almost caused the United States to break off relations with Germany. But President Wilson was determined to preserve America's neutrality, and the sinking was diplomatically smoothed over. German, well, maybe that's because they were all buddy-buddy, right? You're so smart. I don't know how to say that in German. German newspapers defended the sinking as a justified act of war. The English wished to abandon the German people to death by starvation. One German newspaper commented, "We are more humane. We simply sank an English ship with passengers who, at their own risk and responsibility, entered the zone of war operations." Following the outcry of the Lusitania, Germany imposed strict limitations on submarine operations, pledging to warn those on board a vessel about to be attacked so they could abandon ship beforehand. Well, that seems like a pretty nice act in war times. German U-boats continued to torpedo Allied merchant ships, sinking between 50 and 100 a month in 1915. But most ships managed to evade the prowling U-boats and made it safely to British shores. Britain was able to import sufficient food supplies until mid-1917, when the U-boat campaign intensified. Germany and its ally, Austria-Hungary, did not fare as well under the British blockade. By 1916, food and clothing were becoming scarce in both countries. Food riots broke out in more than 30 German cities. Soap, fuel, and other necessities were strictly rationed. The winter of 1916 and 17 became known as the turnip winter, when that humble vegetable became the staple of many diets. Hunger-related diseases such as rickets, scurvy, and tuberculosis were widespread, and in the cities, death from starvation was becoming a daily occurrence. As the blockade of Germany caused increasing misery, a new German naval commander, Admiral Reinhard Scheer, lost patience. Germany's high seas fleet had been bottled up in port for nearly 2 years, unwilling to venture out and engage the British Grand Fleet, which was poised and waiting in the north of Scotland. On May 31st, 1916, Admiral Scheer led the high seas fleet out into the North Sea to challenge the British Grand Fleet. The British steamed south to meet the challenge, and the two fleets clashed off the coast of Denmark in what became known as the Battle of Jutland, the biggest naval battle ever fought before World War II. More than 150 warships, dreadnoughts, battle cruisers, armored cruisers, light cruisers, destroyers pressed forward into action, cannon blazing under the gray sky of the North Sea. By the next morning, June 1st, the Germans had lost 11 ships and 2,500 men. British losses were heavier, 14 ships sent to the bottom with the loss of 6,200 men. Strategically, the battle changed nothing. It had almost no effect on the course of the war. The Germans withdrew to their home ports, where they remained largely inactive until the war ended. From then on, Germany's efforts to win a decisive victory at sea were conducted entirely with submarines. Meanwhile, the British hunger blockade, as the Germans called it, was causing mounting demands for peace. Along with severe shortages of food and almost everything else, the shocking losses of Verdun and the Somme, 1.5 million German soldiers dead and wounded, had shaken Germany's morale. Members of the German naval staff were calling for a return to unrestricted submarine warfare, allowing U-boat captains to sink Allied shipping in international waters without warning. They were convinced that Germany's submarine fleet could destroy Britain's ability to wage war within a few months. There can be no justification or military grounds for refusing any further to employ what promises to be our most effective weapons. Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz declared, "We should ruthlessly employ every weapon that is suitable for striking against England on her home ground." The Battle of Jutland, HMS Invincible, a British battlecruiser, explodes after being hit 5 times by shells from German warships, May 31st, 1916. And that British battlecruiser was called Invincible. Stop with your arrogant names, too, and all of your war cries. Some German military leaders feared that unrestricted submarine warfare would bring the United States into the war, thus guaranteeing Germany's defeat. After a lengthy debate, the Germans decided to take the risk. Fear of a break with the United States, argued Admiral Henning von Holzendorf, must not hinder us from using the weapon that promises success. So here, clearly what he is saying, if you can read between the lines, is they have a relationship with the United States. And that relationship, folks, Operation Paperclip. Read it. We've talked about it. I've talked about it. Possibly in my mysteries. Yes, I think that's where I did a really in-depth little talk in my mysteries about Operation Paperclip. An escaping crew member, top of the photo, slides down a rope as a ship torpedoed by a German U-boat sinks beneath the waves and a lifeboat pulls away. Unrestricted submarine warfare helped draw the United States into the war. So not warning, right? You want to draw some people into the war? Who apparently had some, concern about that. Unrestricted submarine warfare. At the beginning of 1917, and that's really what Abu Ghraib was about as well, unrestricted warfare that the United States was engaging in. That's what that was about. At the beginning of 1917, the German Navy had about, and why would you have to do that on our part, except for artillery? Now war has reached a level beyond any moral bar I could set, right? And that's what the problem is. War has reached a height well beyond any moral bar that any one individual could set. And that's also the problem, isn't it? IQ doesn't add up, and neither does morality, does it? At the beginning of 1970, the German Navy had about 100 submarines available for action in the North Sea, Atlantic, and the Mediterranean. U-boat captains were ordered to begin unrestricted attacks against all vessels approaching the British Isles. The Germans hoped to win the war before the United States could intervene. Woodrow Wilson had been reelected to a second term as president in 1916 with the campaign slogan, He kept us out of war. Most Americans did not want to become involved in a distant European war that seemed at first none of their business. But as the war progressed, American sympathies increasingly favored the Allies. Americans shared with Britain a language and many traditions, and with France, historic ties going back to Lafayette and the Revolutionary War. Germany was seen as a militaristic threat because of its admittedly brutal actions in Belgium, its introduction of poison gas, and its use of unrestricted U-boat warfare, all magnified by Allied propaganda. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. It just seems to me, I almost feel like, I don't know. That I've heard the story before. The United States, meanwhile, had become a major supplier of arms to the Allies. By this time, because of the blockade of German ports, the only available buyers, To finance their arms purchase, the Allies had borrowed more than $2 billion from American banks, a debt that would never be repaid if Germany won the war. Wilson's main concern had been to preserve America's neutrality. All along, he had been urging the warring nations to make peace. Look at those motherfucking banks. Just sorry, Bookless. Not like you haven't heard it before. After his re-election, he attempted to arrange a peace conference, but the opposing sides would not agree on a basis for discussion, and the conference never took place. Both sides still felt that they could win the war and dictate their own peace terms. A rush of events soon changed Wilson's attitude towards the war. On January 31st, 1917, the German ambassador of Washington informed the American government that Germany was about to resume unrestricted submarine warfare against all vessels approaching the British Isles. The United States immediately broke off diplomatic relations with Germany. On February 26, after 2 Americans were drowned in the sinking of the British liner Laconia by a German submarine, Wilson asked Congress for permission to begin arming American merchant ships. 3 days later, the publication of a bizarre message was sent by the German Foreign Minister, Arthur Zimmermann, to the government of Mexico, helped push the United States closer to war. Called the Zimmermann Telegram, the message proposed a military alliance between Germany and Mexico if the United States was to enter the war, with the promise that Mexico would be offered the chance to recover the lost territories of Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Intercepted by and decoded by both British intelligence and the U.S. State Department, the message seemed so outrageous when it was published by American newspaper on March 1st, 1917, that it was thought to be a forgery until Zimmermann himself acknowledged having sent it. Publication of the Zimmermann telegram was followed by German U-boat attacks on 4 American ships, which were torpedoed without warning. That proved to be the tipping point. Speaking before a special session of Congress, President Wilson declared that German submarine campaign was a war against all nations, and on April 6, 1917, the United States formally declared war on Germany. Declarations of war against Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and Turkey followed. Wilson stated that the United States had entered the war because the world must be made safe for democracy, an admirable goal, but very different from the motives that had plunged Europe into war 3 years earlier. Here's a picture. President Woodrow Wilson addresses Congress on April 2nd, 1917. After additional U-boat attacks on American ships, Wilson asked a special session of Congress to declare war on Germany. That's my mom's birthday, April 2nd. The Senate voted 82-6 in favor of war. In the House of Representatives, the vote was 373-50. War was formally declared on April 6th. You know, the problem with all of this is that the message has been so perverted. It has been so, the message is so synthetic. It's just whatever message we can get out there to get people to think this way, this is the message we're going to give them. We want them to think this way, this is the message we're going to give them, right? So, yeah, that is really a conundrum. War itself is not, is it? But once you engage in it, there is quite a whole waterfall, a whole hailstorm of conundrums, right? Tomorrow we will start chapter 12, Mutiny, Revolution. Yeah, I would imagine mutiny. I would imagine. Let's see about that. That's so interesting, isn't it? Mutiny. Look it up. Revolution. We'll explain it tomorrow, I'm sure. Revolution and the collapse of armies. Yeah, I would imagine so. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Are we leaving the Bookless Classroom? No, not early. 45 minutes, over 45 minutes. All right, so perfect timing. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. I am here in the classroom. We are reading the magnificent book, The War to End All Wars, World War I. This book is just really... What's so interesting about this book, just today as I was thinking about it, that I may have heard it in a college class. This may have been read in a college class, and I think I might have skipped like day one, and I was like, what? Oh my gosh, this book is so good. Because I was like, are you kidding? I can go get it from the library. Then I couldn't get it from the library, so then I had to sit in and listen to it. Or maybe I could get it from the library, and I realized it was such a fantastic book. That might have been the case. That actually could have been the case, that I could have gotten this. And then I went back to class. Or maybe I read the book myself. I don't know. I think I probably didn't know when she would get done, so I went to the... But what I remember is that history class actually was just jam-packed full of information, and it was the first time that I began to love history. It was a current event history class, so past World War II. But I think what she did was she probably started with this book so that we had a background on what's all the animosity here and what's all imperialism, nationalism. I remember all that. It was, I don't know. I mean, it was fantastic. It was just really fantastic learning. What I'm saying I don't know about is I don't know if it's all true. That's what I don't know about. Are they getting rid of all of these books tens of thousands of books that they're getting rid of in the local libraries? Why? Is it of course, I bought books. Doesn't mean everybody was buying books. Maybe no, right? And then also the disturbing part of all this is that I do feel like that there are people who hate me because there are embargoes that are going on people, and there is weather warfare that's going on with this top 1% using the military against American citizens and starving them if they talk like they are, or they don't do what they're told to do, like put illegal petitions out there. Just feels like war. It really feels like a real war. Without the artillery, it feels like a war. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, and I told my kids I am a warrior, and my kids didn't believe it. They didn't like it. I think because they knew that this was going to be this kind of a sinister, undercover, in the dark kind of war. I'm trying to fight it by giving you a healthier mind. And that, I believe, gives you a healthier body. And I also try and give you a healthier spirit, too, because that will give you the healthiest body. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Yeah, I feel like they are really abusing people. I feel like they're abusing people. People who are close to me and people who are speaking out against this kind of process. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, and I really am wishing blessings on my family, all of them. All of them. This just I've got positive ideas, right? And I have a nice new shirt on, and there may be people out there that are really hurting. That they're not. It's clear that they're not telling me a lot of things. So that is a fear in my heart. That has been a fear for a long time. So I try and avoid that kind of. I'm doing the best that I can, and that's what I hope that you're doing too. This is Dr. Annette Feravich with Healthy Mind, Body, Spirit on day 180 of the classroom, and we'll be back tomorrow with our book. Thanks for joining me.